realized she didn't have one that second for free. It's been one of those days, my too.
It's more, you are right, our sentence is much like federal standards, but more just emphasizing how, where you can draw the line versus not, you know.
All right. Not that. It's just, I don't have this for that much longer. I need to really take advantage of it, all right? So we're going to try that again, and it's going to be really like with authority. Okay, that was a little too much authority, but we're going to go with it. All right, it's 6 o'clock. We're going to start this meeting of the Planning Commission. So I'm going to call it to order. We will start with a roll call. Carla, will you please lead us in a roll call?
Commissioner Sparks, Commissioner Berman,
Here.
Commissioner Gilardi,
Here.
Vice Chair Long,
Here.
Chair Moffett.
Here. Next up is our land acknowledgement. If everyone could please rise as able for the land acknowledgement. The city of Cotati recognizes that we are on the ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have been stewarding and maintaining a relationship on this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving along, we have approval of the minutes. Would someone who was here last week like to move that we approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
I will not abstain because that would create a stalemate, and I watched it and read them, so I will also say aye. Okay, moving right along to changes to the agenda.
There are no changes this evening.
Fantastic. Let's move to public comment. Does anyone in the audience have a public comment that is not related to items that are on the agenda? Oh, sorry. Okay. Does anybody on Zoom have a public comment to items that are not related to items that are on the agenda, that are within the purview of the Planning Commission?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon or dial *9. And Chair Moffett, that will end a public comment.
Thank you very much. Moving right along, let's look at matters at hand.
Thank you, Chair Moffett and members of the Planning Commission. My name is JP Harries. I'm a senior planner with the City of Cotati. And tonight's matter at hand is discussing design review and entitlements such as variances and a tree removal permit to allow development of a mixed-use project at 8150 La Plaza. I will give a presentation, and then the architect is here tonight who will also have a few words to say, but I will say that the applicant himself is hospitalized right now and is not able to attend the meeting or Zoom in. So I just want to disclose that right up front. So 8150 La Plaza. This is a project actually that staff has been quite supportive of pretty much since it came in. For us, the project that was done there, which we'll discuss briefly, partially, and then this one actually really implements a lot of what the DSP envisions for properties along fronting on La Plaza. And it uses design styles that are promoted by the DSP. And we have, anyway, been fairly supportive of this project since it came in. Let's move on. So 2 new buildings are proposed, 8 surface parking spaces are proposed, and then landscaping. Building 2, which is, just for a better word, is the one that fronts onto La Plaza. It will have 890 square feet of commercial floor, excuse me, ground level commercial floor area, 3 garage spaces, and 2 two-bedroom units. Building 3 would be located at the rear of the property. And it has 2 two-bedroom units and 1 accessible studio unit and 3 garage spaces. Next slide, please. The entitlements required to approve this would be a preliminary and final design review, a tree removal permit for 2 oaks. One's a single trunk oak. The other oak is actually a multi-trunk oak, which we'll talk about tonight, and I think you've read the letters. And then also 1 redwood tree. And the variances that were requested and staff was recommending approval of is to allow vehicular access from La Plaza, exceed the 35-foot height limit. 1 building would be 36 feet, the one at the rear, building 3, and the other one was proposed to be 37 feet 4 inches, I believe. And then a reduced rear setback. There is a 20-foot setback that comes out of the DSP, the downtown specific plan, and then there's another separate setback, which I'll discuss, related to 3rd story and how far away a 3rd story piece can be next to a property line when you have a lower density area adjacent to it. Next slide, please. So the project is located at 8150 La Plaza. It's basically right there on La Plaza, across the street from the fire station. It's a 15,000 square foot lot, so it's about 3.34 acres. Next slide, please. If you look at the zoning, it's located in the LP zoning district, which is part of the downtown specific plan. And behind it, or I should say to the east, is NM, which is medium neighborhood medium density zoning, so multifamily, but not our highest density, but multifamily zoning. To the south is the the vacant lot that the city owns that we're considering an affordable housing project on. And then to the west is the fire station and La Plaza Park. And to the north is currently developed with residential property, but zoned for commercial development. Next slide, please. So development background. House was built in, I think, 1910, and had been used as residence and commercial businesses at different times. It had fallen into disrepair, and then in 2019 and 2023, between that time, an addition was approved, which actually lifted the house up, placed a foundation, and then built the first story beneath the house that was lifted up. And as well, they did all the frontage improvements across the entire front of the lot. And then at the time, they also expanded the utilities in anticipation that they would fully develop this property after this project was completed and if it was successful. Next slide, please. So there's the layout. La Plaza's on your left. Arthur Street would be towards the right in this view. North is mostly up and down. Building 1, which is behind the closed caption, is the existing building where the knife shop is located today. And then you can see how Building 2 and Building 3 would be located, or proposed to be located. And then that central area is basically access and parking. Next slide, please. This is the architecture. It has what we call a Western Victorian style to it, and it uses a lot of the elements of that style, and which are discussed in the DSP. Next slide, please. Again, this is the same similar type architecture. This is Building 3, which would be located at the rear of the property. And next slide, please. So in evaluating this, we look at the design standards for La Plaza. And first of all, it has to allow for certain design types. And one of them is Western Victorian with the shop front. And these images that you see here actually come right out of the DSP. So you can see how the DSP envisions this particular style of development along its frontages. And it tells you things to look for while you're evaluating whether or not it meets the right architectural style. And actually, interestingly enough, in this particular image on the lower part, the building itself is 28 feet to the bottom of that roof, and then the roof goes up another 7 to 9 feet, which is pretty much consistent with what is being proposed today. Whether or not you consider roof pitch an architectural feature could be debated, because you are allowed 35 feet plus 8 for architectural features. So, but we measure it pretty strict to the top of the roof line. Density here is 19 units per acre. And it has a 35-foot height limit and a 20-foot rear setback. This is the standards out of the La Plaza district. And vehicle access only from the side streets and alleys. There are other little standards, but these are the primary ones. And the ones that we'll be discussing a little more tonight. Next slide, please. We also use objective design standards. And I'm not going to go through these, but there's a whole lot that you have to, like how far a wall goes before it has to be broken by a window, or articulate, how wide the trim is, what roof pitches can be, how much usable open space, basically all kinds of different things. And we measure the project against all these design standards. One of them is the max 3, if you're going to have 3-story structures, you have to be 30 feet setback from the property line. If the adjacent property is in a lower density zoning district, so NM, for example, allows from 8 to 10 units per acre, which is obviously less than the 19 units per acre allowed here. So that's the first measure, and then you look to say, is it developed with a single-family home? And if it is, then you apply that 30-foot setback. Next slide, please. So one of the variances that we're asking for is a reduced setback. The DSP, like I said, has a 20-foot rear setback, and the objective design standard has the 30-foot setback for the third story. Now, as I address this, you can't have like a 2 or 1 story in that 30-foot setback. That's fine. It's just that the portion of the building that's 3 stories cannot be within 30 feet of that property line. And the reason we were supportive of this is, one, we were looking at the challenge for me not having alley and side street access. So they're gonna have to come in from the front and provide that parking in the kind of that central area as opposed to coming in from the side or rear. We also recognize that they have to meet density. Under state law, you cannot approve a project lower density than what it's zoned for without also upzoning something else. And then we have our parking requirements, so let's try to figure out how do we make all of this fit. And then something, actually, if you could go back to slide 5 real quick. Something that I didn't discuss, but I think it's worth mentioning, part of my thinking and recommending the variance, stop there, is if you see the pink areas, can you go back one? To the zoning map? Yeah, right there. The pink areas that are labeled CD, which also are kind of in this La Plaza circle, that zoning district has a 10-foot rear setback. So when the DSP, I don't know why those properties were excluded from the DSP. I wasn't here when that came around, but those properties there have a 10-foot setback, as do other zoning districts within the DSP. So part of my rationale and thinking was, well, we have a 10-foot setback in the same kind of area, so it didn't seem extreme. And it was also something that we had considered when we did 120 East Katati. Anyway, if we could go back to slide, wherever we were. Okay, and then the additional, go back one, please. The additional height. So it's 35 feet plus 8 feet for architectural features. And I mentioned that the buildings are proposed to be 1 foot and 1 foot and 4 inches taller than that. I was recommending a variance approval because it uses this 3-story Western Victorian design with measurements that are consistent with that. Commercial floor space, typically, you want more height in the commercial area. You don't work with usually 8-foot ceilings or 9-foot ceilings, it's typically higher, which is common. And then again, just to achieve the density in parking. So we could reduce the height by flattening the roof. It falls below the guidance for that type of design. We could play with plate heights, but none of it seemed, it all seemed pretty consistent with what the direction overall in the DSP was. And then next slide, please. And then for vehicle access, there is no other option. You can only access from La Plaza. There's no way to put in an alley or a side street unless you own the entire block. So with the existing development restrictions, and I will say it's also, the access that he is asking for, it's very much like the historic core, like next to the bank, where it would used to be the bank, but yeah, Remax. There's like a little alley that loads, and the parking is in the back there. So that's kind of what the design will be like here. It's very consistent with kind of what we have there. So it is alley-like, and one even wonders if it really is a variance that's needed, but I want to make sure that you're understanding that access will be coming directly off La Plaza, kind of right between the existing building and the proposed building. Next slide, please. And then tree removal. So I know that it might have been difficult to see in those plans, so that's why I wanted to highlight it here again. Again, La Plaza is on your left, and the Arthur Street neighborhood would be on your right here. But the 3 X's show the trees that are proposed for removal. One up to the left is the redwood tree, which is actually starting to decline in health and will not survive this construction project. and there's some utility conflicts there as well. The other one is not proposed for removal, on the very northern part, right on the fence line, but I don't think it will survive. So I disclose that we're probably gonna see a loss of that tree. That's about a 10-inch live oak there. And then the one that, that you've received some comments on is located to the east or towards the back of the property. And it was labeled as a 10-inch oak. I don't think anybody was trying to lie or anything. If you go out there, there are basically 3 branches. 2 of them are about 10, 11 inches. And then another one's about 4 or 5 inches, I would say. When I went out there, I didn't look at the multiple trunks. Trees were where they seemed to be, but I went out there again this morning when I started receiving some of the comment letters. And I agree that, it's probably a larger tree than what it says on the plan, and the mitigation for removing that tree should be bumped up. So, and I also recognize that it is screening for the Arthur Street residences and recommended 2 additional conditions. One, that they plant at least 2 additional trees in that northeast corner to make up for the loss of that tree in terms of screening, and then address the mitigation to account for the multiple trunks. So they would have to plant basically 10 additional trees or pay an in lieu fee for those additional trees if we proceeded with that recommended mitigation. Next slide, please. And then in terms of CEQA, the project is consistent with general plan and zoning densities. No unidentified or project-specific impacts that are peculiar to the site. So essentially, CEQA guidelines 15183 applies, which allows the project to tier from our program analysis done for the general plan itself. So the mitigation measures that are in the general plan that would be applicable to this project are applied, and you'll see those in the listed conditions of approval. Furthermore, it also qualifies for an infill exemption under CEQA section 15332. And next slide is just the staff recommendation, which is that staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution recommending that the City Council approve preliminary and final design review, variances, and a tree removal permit to allow construction of mixed-use project at 8150 La Plaza. And with that, I can be available for questions, but you may want to let the architect speak first, up to the chair. Commissioner.
Just one quick question before we let the architect, and maybe we all have quick questions. Can you just explain like I am 5? The tree removals, because if I'm looking at these plans, I see in the northeast corner 3 oak trees that are identified on like this first page right here. And I see only 1 that's marked to be removed and 2 that are marked to stay.
Right.
Can you just fully tell me the trees that are there, which ones are being removed and which ones are staying?
Oh, boy.
Because then it does
Yeah,
later
no,
talk
I'm
about
really
keeping a
kicking
clump of
myself
trees
because I
there.
actually have photographs on my phone, and we could be looking at a nice image, but I don't have it. So, actually, I wonder if one of the letters that you received today might have it. But if you're in the lot, looking, I'm going to reference the site plan.
Plan view, that's what I was thinking, like references.
Yeah. Look on page, of your packet, oh, it doesn't have a page number. Oh, page 21 or 22. Now, I do want to say something. There is a conflict between the architectural drawing and the civil drawing in terms of where those trees are located, and this might be part of the confusion. The civil drawing better locates where the trees are going to go. The architectural drawing intended for there to be some trash storage in that area, and so when the civil drawing was done, they said, oh, okay, here's where the trash storage is going, but there happen to be 2 trees there, so they indicated them to be removed. However, they're not intended to be removed, and what we would do is just relocate where that trash is gonna get, where that would be relocated. So either right up a little bit next to the other one, or just a little bit away from it, but we would not take out those trees just for a place to store garbage. So those trees that are kind of along the fence line, that are indicated to be saved on the architectural drawings, will remain. If you move to the south a little bit, there's a clump there. It's like a 3-branch clump, or what I call a clump. It's basically a split trunk. So it branches into 3 different trunks, and I believe there were photos that were sent. It's about 30, 40 feet tall. I can't see it from this distance.
I think those are saying that's going, but
Yeah, it's hard to tell on this one because you can't see the multiple trunks, but this one's staying about on here. This one I think might be going. So this is actually on this property over there. So this tree would go, and these 2 over here stay. This one I believe will go.
And then the one,
And then the redwood
this
is,
one stays?
that's on this property back there.
Both of these are?
Yeah,
So this is the one in the picture that is going, this one, that's this one right
which
here.
is this one here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And which is, then this actually, you see multiple of the trees, but it's pretty much this larger
Yeah.
one on the left.
Gotcha, this one right here,
That one would stay, this one goes.
okay,
It's a little bit hard to tell because you don't have a good perspective.
okay.
This one is deeper into the property.
Yeah.
Which is hard to discern in there.
Okay, I think I got it, thank you.
That's
Yours.
But if we look at page 21 of your packet, you can see the trees removed or proposed to stay are the 2 oak trees that are adjacent to the property line. And then it's a little bit difficult to read in this size of an image, but there's an existing, just a little bit into the building's footprint, you'll see a note saying existing 10-inch oak to be removed. One of the branches, one of the trunks is 10 inches. The other one's approximately 10 inches, maybe 11. And then there's another 3rd trunk that comes off of, which is, I would say, half the size of one of the other trunks, about 5 or 6 inches. Shelley was out there measuring. She might have a good idea of the exact measurements of those. Any other quick questions?
quick questions before the architect? No? Take it away.
I'm Brent Russell. I'm the architect on the project. I apologize for the confusion about the trees. That was not intentional. There's the challenge in meeting the density and meeting the circulation and meeting the parking and giving appropriate fire access, even though the fire station's right across the street. And so it's juggling all that and then making sure there's a variety of units available for people to rent, you know, as small as a studio, as big as a multi-bedroom. The preference was to do 2 bedrooms, so in case there's 2 unrelated family members that want to rent, they can split the rent. Each one has its own bedroom and its own bath. The idea of putting the buildings around the perimeter was to more effectively use the site and also provide a barrier between vehicular activity and the neighbors behind us. So the idea is that the vehicular activity occurs in the middle of the site, not around the edges. And so, hopefully the neighbors aren't impacted by that. The units themselves, if you look carefully, are generally oriented towards the center of the site. The bedrooms, the living rooms, all the main spaces that are going to be used. And the idea was to help, create as much privacy as possible for the neighbors along the perimeter. There are some windows towards the back so that the wall isn't blank, but they're in areas like a bathroom or a kitchen window, or I'd like to have a window at the top of the stairs to provide some light. If that is a concern, we can look at making some of those windows smaller or providing some sort of opacity to the windows so that people's privacy is secure for those particularly in the back. The other thing is the roofs were oriented in such a way that the eave, which is the part of the roof closest to the property line, the highest part of the roof is away from the edge of the property line. So there was some thought that definitely went into that. And then the owner wanted to make sure, he's big on decks, so we made sure all the decks, generally speaking, were facing towards the middle of the property or towards the street. There's a couple where they're on the sides, but only the narrowest portion is facing towards the neighbors in the rear. And we wanted to make sure the building was not only compatible with the design guidelines, but was complementary to the building that's already there architecturally and also to the house that's on the left side to the north of the property. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions before we open it? No, I
Okay.
think we'll open it to public comment. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, we have a few comment cards, and then we'll open it up to general public comment after that. First up, we have Jenny Blaker from the great city of Cotati.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. I live on Arthur Street, and I'm concerned about the impacts on the immediate neighbors and also on the neighborhood in general. They will be affected by the site, the size, the height, the proximity, and the loss of the oak trees. The project is requesting 3 variances. Instead of the minimum of 20-foot setback, they're requesting a 10-foot setback. They're requesting a height variance, and instead of 30 feet for the 3-story building, 10 foot. That brings the rear building, building 3, really close to the neighbors at the back, and it's also very close to the neighbors at the side. It seems to me a lot of attention has been paid to the front of the building that faces La Plaza and the fire station, with less attention being paid to the neighbors at the back. I'm glad you had the questions about the trees. Thank you. Yeah, the one that's marked as being a 1 10-inch tree on the plan has 2 12-inch trunks and the third smaller one as well. They definitely do provide screening, visual buffer, and a privacy buffer, as well as shade, habitat for birds, visual appeal, and all the other things that most of us like about having trees in the town. It would take decades, probably 30 years, for new trees to grow to the same height. They're 30 to 40 feet high. They're probably 30 to 40 feet old. The oak trees, native oaks, that's another point. What would replace them? As well as the immediate neighbors, there's the question about neighborhood compatibility and setting a precedent for this area in the DSP. I'm not aware of any other 3-story buildings in the inner or outer hub, and this could be a way to show how it could be done while keeping to the 20-foot or 30-foot minimal setbacks and the height setback. I understand the need for increased affordable housing and density, but density depends on the number of units, not the size of the units, as I understand it. So I'm wondering whether it would be possible to reduce the size of some of the units, reduce some of the deck and patio areas, which are already being apparently more are being provided than are required, and also maybe using some of the covered garage space to help bump up the living space. And I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Linnell Hardy, also from the great city of Cotati.
So first of all, I would like to clarify the question about those pink areas that were on the zoning map. I believe when they were rezoning, they gave people a choice of what they wanted, how they wanted their property zoned. So that might be why you have those pink areas. So aside from that, I wanted to talk about the scale of the project. And I have made this little person here, and this represents me. I'm 5'4", and if you look at me and this, I would represent the 37-foot building that would be behind my house, 10 feet away from the fence. And it may be 10 feet from me to you, and that's massive. It's a massive structure, and it will overshadow my yard. It will be an intrusion into our lives. And I think that the plan can be better. I don't think it has, I mean, certainly it can be, the footprint can be scaled down. I think that there are smaller, you could make smaller units inside of the buildings. Certainly they don't need 3 bathrooms. You know, there's a lot of things that they could do. It doesn't have to be as big as it is, and it can still maintain the density. All you're looking for is 5 units. And my ask tonight is for you to deny the following: the 10-foot rear setback, together with the removal of the 30-foot oak that is directly behind my property. Now, the oak is 17 feet from the fence. So so if it's a 30-foot building, it would be closer than the oak tree. And if that's not possible, then I would further request that you deny the 10-foot rear setback and decrease the height of the building, number 3 building, to 2 stories. And then the 30-foot setback on the 3rd story wouldn't be a problem. And you could lose the garages and make those into living space to get your 5th unit on that build. I also wanted to point out that I live in a 3-bedroom family house, and it was built, well, it was brought to the property in 1952. And that 3-bedroom single-family house is smaller than all of those 2-bedroom apartments. So they don't need to be that big necessarily.
Thank you
So
so
I-
much for your time.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Would anyone else in the audience like to speak before we move to our Zoom? Please come forward.
Hello, I'm Adrienne Lobby, a member of the great city of Cotati. Couple of quick things. I don't know why the accessible unit is the smallest unit, assuming perhaps this person's going to be in a wheelchair. Living in a tiny home does not seem like a great idea for that. This is not affordable housing, any of it. I'm assuming the largeness has to do with getting market rate rents or more. So that's not really what we've been trying to prioritize. But mostly I just want to talk about feelings, because it turns out that I have been at Ms. Hardy's home a few times. And a couple things that always impress me is that the family that lives in this home, it's an old home. And my house is somewhere between these fancy market rate houses and what her house is, but each one of our rooms is bigger than each one of her rooms. So the living room is tiny by my standards. The bathroom, it's all very small. And I think that is a small, when I look at it, I think, well, this is how it used to be. People lived in smaller houses and they really loved their yards because there's this lovely yard. Now, I have a little yard, and it is embarrassing because I never hardly get out there and I don't do enough work on it. But this yard, it's always mowed. There's this nice garden that's, I have been the benefit of some of the products of that yard, that garden. So it's used. It's not just an open space. And I think the argument that it's an oasis for those who live there, and maybe is a question of preserving that, as well as just like all the rules and the variances and all the, the numbers and stuff that we've been talking about and that are in all these letters, so I don't have to go into them. But thanks for hearing me.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm also an Arthur Street resident, and I don't really have a whole lot to add other than I'm a land surveyor. I study a lot of different entitlement stuff in Petaluma, and when I read the I don't even know what you call this the staff report, I didn't really see what the special circumstances were applicable for these variances. All I saw was, if we don't get the variance, then the plan as is won't work. So I wasn't here to hear everything before I came here, but I may miss something, but that's really the only thing I have to add is I don't see how it fits the variance findings, number one. Thanks.
Thank you. Carla, let's move to our Zoom attendees.
Thank you, Chair Moffitt. Lori, you have the floor.
Hi. I was wondering what happens, there's plans for the reunification of the hub, and they were talking about putting the fire access on right there. So if we do that, this building now, what happens in the future when if you fill in the hub? Well, you can't just pick up a fire station and move it. So that's my concern, that not considering the long-term ones, ramifications of putting up buildings now that might be in the way of access in the future. No, thank you.
Neil Hancock, you have the floor.
Yes, hello, Neil Hancock. I wrote in with some of the pictures showing the way that it's massing. And looking at the packet, I mean, the grading plan would be what would appear to be the most official view of the project, because that's going to be handed off to a subcontractor who will follow it. So it just doesn't seem to meet, as has actually already been said, the description of the trees that are coming down. And the two trunk tree is really measured at breast height, 4.5 feet up. So that's where that view is of that tree that's there. And it just seems like there could be some more design thought as to way that tree could be used on the property, and the massing of it to complement the buildings that are coming or are being thought of there. But anyway, that's my input to say, we're going with this variation, or this variance. You might have heard of this place called Oak Land. It's had all its oaks chopped down, and we don't really want to go that way. It's nice to have the oaks at the front, really appreciate those, appreciate all the work that's been done. on that sidewalk to keep them on the front of the building, but I would just like to see what other design option could be there for retaining at least the eastern side of one of those trunks. I think the tree would be able to survive that. It would seem like it would really change that way that it masses, and there could be some of the open space at the back. So that's my request, is that variance. It just doesn't seem to work allowing that variance doesn't seem to work very well for this property at the back. Thank you very much.
Chair Moffat, that will end public comment.
Thank you. Who would like to go first? Ed, Shelley? Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And thank you. When I looked at this, my first thought was, why isn't the 3 stories on La Plaza? To me, that makes sense, having 3 stories right on La Plaza. If we're going to have a 3-story building, that makes more sense to me. So if we flip-flopped and had 2 stories in the back, 3 stories in the front, and playing with the units and parking, I like those thoughts. I don't know how that would fit. If we could, but putting the bigger building in the front, to me, just makes sense, to front the street and not the back. I mean, that's what we want. That's what it seems like. That's what the downtown specific plan is asking for, these larger buildings to be on the street. Is that true?
Yeah, it's an accurate statement.
And also the tree, which I went and visited today, and I had to do math, and I just learned how to look at a tree in this what is it called?
Diameter at breast height. Or
Yes.
DBH.
Diameter at breast height. Yes, that's where the tree, that's where you, but because I was down there at the bottom of it, saying this is where it would be, right? Because that's where everything is. And then I had to do math and everything. It was very difficult. So I learned something, diameter at breast height, and that tree it's something. And it's, to me, I want to save it. I mean, it for the neighborhood behind it, for the neighbors that are going to live there, this will be a lovely place. This will be a piece for peace. It's an oak of peace, and that would be PEACE, a place to go hug not only 1 tree, but 2 trees and 3, because it's a 3-in-1 tree. So, I'm just, it looked like a very small site to me to have all these buildings here. It seemed like it would be tight, very tight fit. I don't know how it's going to work out, but the larger building should be in front on La Plaza. I wonder about that and what the commission thinks about that, and saving the tree and the variance. Then we wouldn't have a problem with a 20-foot variance in the back. We wouldn't have 10-foot. It would be 20.
I like the design. I think that it keeps with the current repurposing of the old house that was there. And I'm also glad that you're not a developer that's going to use all these ridiculous state laws that could put a 4 or 5-story building there at high density, because unfortunately, the state has tied our hands in those kind of decisions, and it would just go in without our input. So I'm glad that the developers are doing that. My question is, on the building number 3, I know it talks in the plan about having the garages over to the right-hand side, so from the access, you don't see the garage doors in that building. If you were to flip the building, because I don't care whether you can see that garage door or not, because people driving by looking back, I don't think that's that big of a deal. If you were to flip the building and shift it over to the right with a 20-foot setback, the way I'm looking at the plan, you'd be able to retain that oak tree in the back corner. I think that, and with the 20-foot setback, shifting the building to the right, you're going to be able to retain that tree. So does that sound like a feasible type thing to do? Because, I mean, I understand what Shelley's saying about having the 3-story building in the front, but I don't know if we want that on the street because it's more imposing. I kind of more like the feathered back personally myself.
And you're saying it looks like that, you'll just be able to see the garage down the driveway?
Yeah, so the building in the back, there's a lot of space over on the right-hand side. If you were to flip it, shift the whole building over into this corner, you'd create a big space over here. You'd be able to save that big oak tree in the back and have a 20-foot variance in the back property.
Right, but the concern was that you'd be able to see the garage door down the driveway.
Yeah.
30 feet down.
So you would still have a 10-foot variance to the property on Arthur Street in that back. You would just have a larger variance to the property directly to the north.
20-foot property, 20-foot variance to the back fence.
Right now it has a 10-foot, but how
Right.
would that become 20 if you just shifted it to the right?
If you had shifted it, in one of the questions that I asked in an email about this, it had, in the plans, it said you'd lose 4 parking spaces, but then the answer came back, you'd only use 2 parking spaces. So you take this building, shift it over this way, shift it down this way a little bit. You'd be
And go
able to
ahead and
save
lose
the
2
oak, you'd have a
spaces.
20-foot variance between the building and the homes on Arthur Street, that line fence there. Because there is, if you look at the right-hand side of it, where there's the patio and there's space over there, it seems like you could do that.
Okay, so let's ask the architect, and I'd love to hear your response. And I think those are 2 separate questions, so I'd like your answer to both. Would it be possible to shift the building to the west and retain that tree?
To answer your question more specifically, if we shifted to the building to the right, what we'd have to do is move the accessible unit that's downstairs. And that, see, part of the issue with the accessible unit is that is the one unit that has to be at ground level. Otherwise, you have to provide an elevator, and I think an elevator is not a good solution to get to an accessible unit. Pardon me?
Sorry. Why would you have to move it from the bottom if you just shifted the building over?
If we're keeping the general parking configuration, what I would need to do, and I've already been thinking about where you were heading with that. If we shifted, and this doesn't deal with the rear setback necessarily, but if we shifted it to the right to save the oak tree, because of the way the parking configuration is, we would need to move the accessible unit to the right-hand side of the building from the left so that cars could still get in there. So that, that doesn't change the general configuration overall. If we move it at least 20 feet from the property line, then we're going to lose 2 parking spaces for sure. And I don't know how flexible the city is about parking requirements. I know that they typically don't like to see cars, and so that's why most of the, quote, exposed parking is to the sides and not visible down the driveway. So that's why we've done covered parking in many different situations. keeping in mind in all this is we're trying to provide parking not only for the residents, but we're trying to provide parking for the retail uses. The one that's there now, which is kind of a live-work facility, and then the one that's going to be in front. So it's that whole balancing act. And part of what you, as you well know on parking, it's not just the parking space, it's the access to it. The idea is to have as little area given over to a driveway and turnaround space as possible, so we have less paving and all the things that go with that. So that's why the buildings, in essence, have been put around the perimeter. Then you had a second question. I don't know if I answered it.
Well, so only looking at the first of flipping it so that the ADU unit is on
To the right instead of
to
to
the
the
right
left,
instead of the
yes.
left, and then shifting it over, and then let's say you kept the 10-foot variance, that would put about 2/3 of that building over on the side that had
Towards
the
the
apartment,
apartments, correct.
and much less of it on the other side, and that would
Yes.
retain all of the oaks that are still there.
Correct.
And then you'd still be willing to look at maybe having some opacity or opacity
Yes,
to the windows
Yes,
and kind of
correct.
something like that.
And we could, JP, we could ask for a variance for fewer parking spaces.
I think that, yeah, there's no hierarchy in terms of parking is better versus a setback is better. Both address, either way, you're getting to recognizing that there's a challenge with the site and trying to make density and provide all the parking that you need and then meet setbacks. So, yeah, that, we could easily do that. For the same reason, we could ask for a variance on the reduced setback. Typically, it's parking, which drives the major concerns that we hear, which is why we went kind of down that path, and what I've said about the 10-foot setback in the other parts of the area. But it's completely at your discretion to provide a recommendation, and then the applicant's willingness to do it.
I'm going to be honest that I'm concerned about having less parking only because what we hear from so many people who live in these types of developments is that parking is their number
Is an
one
issue.
concern. I mean, I just, time
I know,
after
it's
time
just-
after
it's
time,
just
people come
trying-
up and talk to us about
Yeah,
that.
trying to balance, the impact of the existing residents, trying to make it a workable project. That's why I'm like, when I'm like, well, why couldn't we move the building, save those trees, and increase the barrier.
It sounds like we could somewhat give a little, get a little, and find kind of a compromise that's going to be somewhere in the middle.
Can I add a little context too? In this,
Please do.
And this is regarding Commissioner Berman's comment about the three-story building in the front. There's two reasons. I mean, the front building has a three-story portion to it. It's towards the back of the building. There's two reasons I didn't do it towards the front. One of them was the owner was very specific about making sure that the new building, building number 2, the front of it was very complementary to the building on the right, which is also a 2-story building. And the other concern I had was that street tree, and I think that's a bad term for that tree that's in the front, has a pretty large canopy, and my concern was, the canopy's up a ways, but my concern was if the 3-story was up against the sidewalk, that there would be a conflict with the canopy. And so I wanted to accommodate that. I mean, as it is, there's only a small portion of the building that is close to the sidewalk, because the original intention was to save the redwood tree. And between the condition of the redwood tree and the fire department wanting to have a massive pipe to get their water back there, it unfortunately is going to end up being taken out.
Yeah.
But that's why I didn't have the 3 stories all the way to the front. So I just wanted to add that context.
Thank you.
If there's any other questions, let me know, but I'll sit down otherwise.
Yeah, we might call you up again, and I'm going to just be unconventional. And Linnell, can you come up again, and can I ask you questions? Because this project affects you and your life, and I want to recognize that and talk to you about it. Yeah.
What do you think? Knowing that, projects and development happen, and the possibility of this project happening is that it's, going to happen. So what I like to see in these cases is the best possible solution that we can find for you that is going to work, that is also going to work for the project. And so looking at moving over the building by several feet, having most of it on the apartment side, flipping it, and retaining all of that trees, is that starting to
Yes,
reach?
that would be very helpful,
Okay,
but I would also like that 20-foot setback.
okay,
And then they could forget the 30-foot setback for the third story.
okay,
That would work for me.
okay. Thank you.
The parking in the back here, does that serve the existing building?
Yes, it does.
Okay. The residents and the commercial, both components of that building?
I didn't hear. Oh, yeah, there's a residential upstairs, and it's connected. It's a live-work unit, so there's actually direct connection down to the commercial.
I guess there's not a garage on that building.
There is no garage.
So those spaces back there. And I know it was in the staff report, but what were the minimum requirements for the new building for parking? Is it 14 spaces for the two new buildings?
The live-work unit, I have to look at my analysis in there. But
I guess what
what
I'm trying to understand is, does that 14 spaces to code satisfy the required parking for all three buildings, or just the two new buildings?
For all three buildings.
For all three, okay.
Yeah. There is some street parking in front, which are not included in the analysis. So it only looks at the on-site parking that would be provided by the development.
Okay. That was my other question. If there's any on-street parking in front, I thought there was. There's quite a bit. Can you maybe give us a little background for our own knowledge? I was doing a little research on kind of what's required by the state code and the city code in order to approve a variance. There's certain things that must be met.
Well, it comes from our code of ordinances. Under our police powers, you can grant a variance. What you want to avoid when granting a variance is providing, you only want to grant it under certain situations, and that is, are you giving someone a benefit that the neighbor doesn't have? And vice versa, if a strict adherence to the code, would you be denying a property owner a benefit that the neighbor has? So you look at that. There has to be a fairness issue with respect to variances.
Sorry, just so I'm trying to understand, just like if there's a pre-existing condition that kind of is a variance on an existing property, you kind of have to, are you saying allow for that on the new project?
So the findings are on page 43 of the packet.
Yeah.
And there are special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, so that the strict application of the land use code deprives the property of privileges enjoyed by other property in the vicinity and within the same district.
Right. I read that. I'm just kind of more like in layman terms trying to understand what that means.
So the idea behind a variance is if we apply the rule to you, then, or your specific property, it takes away the rights that that property would have that other properties enjoy purely because it has some unique characteristic to it. And so the perspective in this situation was, frankly, when the downtown specific plan was envisioned, it looked at redevelopment of the entire area and all these new alleyways being put in, all these different access points being put in, which that can't be accommodated when you're just developing a single infill lot with one access point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the rationale behind how the findings were made.
Okay. And then there's some other language that talks about, like, the hardship can't be created by the owner of the project, basically self-imposed. So can you maybe give us some background on what that would mean?
Well, the project has to be designed in a way to try to meet all of the rules that apply to it. So you can't do something that basically creates the problem that you're trying to avoid. I mean, I think you said it. That's what you don't want to have a project actually create its own problem. Then it says, well, I need a variance for that.
So like an example to extrapolate on that is like the parking is required to have 14 parking spaces. None of the on-street parking can count. There's no other location where the parking can be put per the standards. And so the need for that parking and the need to meet the density push the situation where the buildings are located where they are. I think to the discussion that's been made, there's definitely room for some movement around, but that's how staff got to the point of being able to recommend that the commission support a variance. And then lastly, I would add for the additional height on the roof line, it's to meet the intent of the DSP, which defines architectural types and also actually specifies flexibility in height to provide that roof pitch that the DSP envisioned.
Okay. What was my other question? Give me a second. I might have to come back to it. Oh, yes, could the no net loss density, can you give a little background on that? I know that was also in it, but kind of just more in layman's terms as well, just to kind of understand how that plays into this kind of conflict on the property.
It's a fairly new law. I want to say maybe it's 3 or 4 years old. And it's one of the hundreds that have come at us from the state. But essentially what it does is it restricts the cities and counties from approving any project below its density without either simultaneously or within 180 days upzoning another property to make up for the loss in density. So the no net loss is the idea that once we've established our zoning, which we're required to do through our housing element, and established what our expectation for housing development is, we can't adjust that downward through actions. We cannot lose the ability without compensating for it somewhere else. So that's not, a developer would have to come to us and say, hey, I want a lower density, I'll upzone this property for you. We don't do that. We just kind of say you have to build to density,
Okay.
Yeah. So that discretion, I was just about to say, 5 years ago, you had that discretion, and the city would exercise it, say, there's too many units there, knock 2 off, and then the applicant would have to see if they could make that pencil and make it work, but we had that discretion and exercised it. That's gone now.
And none of these are affordable, going to be
None
considered affordable housing?
None will be deed restricted as affordable housing. I would say that the studio unit, as small as it is probably affordable by design. But they're also not obligated to build it. Any development that is 9 units or less can pay an in lieu fee. They don't have to build an actual unit.
And I would just add, if they were proposing to provide one affordable housing unit, they could build under the density bonus laws, and we would be mandated to grant what are now called variances as exceptions, concessions, or incentives to support that development.
That's true.
Right. If they did one
Just
affordable
one,
housing unit.
For 6 units.
What were you saying that under a certain amount, you said that, the accessible unit doesn't have to be included? Or
No, I just said that it's small enough that I would consider it affordable by design, but it wouldn't be deed restricted to be affordable.
So in Cotati, when you build 9 units or less, the city allows you to pay a fee into the Affordable Housing Fund that the city then uses to build affordable housing, rather than build your affordable housing on site as a percentage of your project.
And that's what's happening with this project?
Correct.
Gotcha. Has there, when you guys were doing the review, was there any concepts looked at that looked at smaller units?
No, we did not request or look at smaller units.
So there is potential to meet the density requirement and not create that hardship of requiring a variance?
I would say sure, of course, you can design smaller units. What I don't have is the luxury of having the actual owner and applicant here to tell us what he feels he needs to build in order to recover the costs of the project. And
Right.
yeah.
I'm just trying to reconcile those two things, because in order
But
to.
you could always make smaller units, and yeah, we don't define how large a unit must be, so.
Yeah, density is based on unit count, not the size of the unit.
Right, because that was a comment brought up by the public, that they could meet that density requirement and, design smaller units. And by doing so, I would have to imagine that they could make it fit without requiring, with maybe making it within a 20-foot setback. If that option hasn't been looked at, I'd kind of be hard to press to approve it as is.
Yeah, we didn't have that discussion, and I would have to have it with the applicant
Yeah.
directly, yeah.
No further questions from me at this time?
Okay. I like the project, actually. It's a beautiful building, it's a nice design. Fair market value housing in Cotati, we actually don't see a lot of them lately. We haven't in a little bit, so I enjoy seeing it in the downtown area. I think it's good for our city. I think that there are some tweaks, that we could do, and I really, truly appreciate your willingness to kind of look at those tweaks and work with your neighbors and figure out kind of the best solution, both for current residents and for our future residents, because we're going to have, 6 new families, and we need to think about them as well. I'm loving the idea of, if it's possible, to flip the building around and shift it over to the right. I actually think that creates a really nice kind of little park area for your future residents under those kind of oak clumps, where right now you don't have that kind of community congregating area. And that gives you that, which is much more community-oriented, which is wonderful, and I think a better design overall. I am hesitant to look at removing parking spaces because we have so many of our other residents coming from places with smaller parking, especially residents who have relied on their garages when their units were being developed as parking spaces. We know that we usually don't use the garages as parking spaces. I have heard people saying that to me from that podium way too many times. So I think that moving it and shifting it so the majority of the building is behind the apartment complex is a really good solution, and also kind of reducing those window sizes or looking at opacity in the windows, especially for the ones on the left-hand side, would be a good idea as well. Otherwise, yeah, I like it. I don't think I have any other questions. I think they're all addressed. So I guess what my real question is what questions do y'all have again?
What about the fire department that Lori brought up?
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not familiar with that property being identified as a cut through, or I didn't, it's not in the plan that I'm aware of.
So the downtown specific plan envisions essentially the hub streets becoming the primary circulation route. And it includes the location currently of the fire station where it is, and it envisions these properties being redeveloped with the density that we're discussing.
She was concerned with the access right from the fire department coming out that way, is that?
It's envisioned in the plan.
So it went positive street.
Correct. Now, there's a detail, or a, not, I wouldn't call it a detail, there's a concept for access for both this site and the fire station under the future hub reunification.
I didn't understand what she was saying.
Okay, well, let's talk about conditions. Because I think we're at a little disagreement on conditions.
I, like I said, I'm in preference of the 20-foot setback and of the flipping building number 3 and shifting it over to the right.
Okay. And you both agree with the reduction of parking spaces? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I could be open to that. There is quite a bit of parking on the street there in front. I would also be curious to see if there's any way to, design it to allow for a 20-foot setback and still meet the parking requirements. And I think the only way you could do that is to, reduce the footprint of the building.
Well, what about taking out the balconies? Or one of them?
I think we can look at taking out the side balconies. Those are the ones I originally designed because the owner said, why don't we do a cantilever balcony? And that's kind of a no-no, but we worked one out the front. If we eliminated 2 parking spaces, then yes, I can make it 20 feet from the property line. But that means taking out the 2 parking spaces. 2 of the outside ones would have to be removed. Keep in mind that when you look at the buildings, generally speaking, the ground floor footprint is determined by the garage size. That's sadly, vehicle circulation and parking were driving a lot of this. The only real ground floor space that we have that's not parking is the retail space in the front where it's required, and the accessible unit where technically it's not required, but it's not very practical to do an elevator to an accessible unit, because if the power goes out, the person, if they have mobility issues, out of luck. So, originally where the accessible unit was going to be a garage, and it's like, I went, oh crap, I got to have an accessible unit. So that's how we arrived there. But, we could shift the building over to the right so it's more behind the apartment buildings, and that's fairly easy to do. And if you say, yeah, you can eliminate 2 parking spaces, I agree with Commissioner Moffitt, that creates its own problems, but if we eliminate 2 spaces, then I can shift the whole building 10 feet forward, that back building.
And while you're up here, and I apologize for not looking for this earlier in the plan, but are there EV chargers that are going to be in the
That's going to be
garages?
required. That's a state law. I have to provide, at very least, provide a 220 40 amp outlet for that. And my intention would be to just do it. I suspect also in the non-dedicated covered parking space, we'll have to put at least 1 or 2 in. That's just a requirement.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, that will be done, and we'll have to be putting solar on it. So
Just for some clarity, you're saying the footprint can't be reduced because of the garage and the accessible unit?
the footprint's not likely to be able to be reduced because those garages are kind of the minimum they need to be to, for a 2-car or 1-car or whatever. So the physical footprint at ground level is not likely to be changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would assume they'd still have to also be desirable units to be fair market value.
Yeah.
Okay, well, shall we vote on conditions separately or all together? What do y'all think? Let's do them separately.
Whatever your pleasure.
All right. First, we're going to vote on, I'll ask staff real quick, can we make it a condition that they flip and move it over to the right? Is that even possible for us to say?
I would say the answer to that is yes, since you're only providing a recommendation to the city council.
True.
You can make a series of recommendations. And then I would also ask if you would want this project to come back to you with the changes, or if you're comfortable making the recommendations, us applying them and then presenting it to the city council as you've recommended the changes. Because I also don't, we don't have the applicant here.
Yeah.
And he needs to be involved in this decision-making. So I would say, yes, you can absolutely make the recommendations. You're not making actual conditions of approval.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, well, our first recommendation is that the building be flipped and moved to the east in order to save the oak tree that's destined to be removed currently. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The second condition
So
of
implicit in
recommendation.
that is the saving of the tree. So I mean,
Right.
it's almost a separate condition in my mind. That tree must remain. And the tool to get there is flipping the building.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Our second conditional recommendation, recommended
Two
condition.
and a half?
Recommended condition, okay, is that we move the building forward 10 feet, removing 2 parking spaces, allowing for a parking variance of 12 spaces instead of 14, and maintaining the 20-foot setback. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. And the third condition, well, I guess we don't have to vote about the 2 additional trees being planted because we saved the tree.
Yeah.
So that one is null and void.
You had also mentioned window opacity. Did you want that, include that?
Yeah, I'd like to look at opacity of windows.
And reduced unit size? No? Okay.
Did you want to look at that? No?
I'd like to look at increasing the
Affordable unit?
the accessible unit. There is the proposed garages, there's a 1-bedroom garage, and then next to it, a 1-bedroom garage. See, because to me, that affordable unit is the same size as the 2-car garage, exactly. There's a 1-car garage and there's a 2-car garage. If we had 2 1-car garages, then we can increase the accessible unit by half a garage, which would make it about 600 square feet.
Can I have one less parking space then?
Ah! Well, you will. Because you'll have 2 1-car garages. I don't.
You'd lose another parking space, though,
Yes.
because the garages count for parking spaces. It's that
No, all right.
balancing act.
All right, we have our conditions. Do we have a motion?
Are we going to ask that this come back to us before it go to council, or are we approving it with these conditions to be sent to council?
I think we approve with the conditions to be sent to council, and if the applicant does not want to meet these conditions, then they can bring it back to us.
That sounds
Good to
reasonable.
me.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve this project with the aforementioned conditions.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have reports by staff.
Thank you, Chair Moffett, members of the commission. Just briefly, this evening, I wanted to highlight that we are likely to cancel the December 1st Planning Commission meeting. There's a chance we will hold the December 15th meeting, but that's still to be determined. So this could be the last meeting of the year. Definitely the 1st is canceled, and look for notification on the 15th. And thank you for kind of working with staff as we're trying to bring items before you, but make sure that they're fully vetted and we're ready to be prepared. And we did really appreciate getting all the feedback ahead of the meeting this evening. I think it really allowed us to get to where we did tonight with the recommendation. That was great. And then the other thing I just want to highlight is the department has implemented the business liaison program. So if anyone's interested in opening a business or an existing business has questions or is running into challenges with governmental aspects, they can call the department and they will be assigned a staff member who is intended to help them navigate that challenge, even if it's not kind of managed by the community development department. Community development staff will kind of work with them and kind of shepherd them through the processes of other departments to be a liaison and work with them just to help. This is implementing the department's work plan, but it's also part of TOC compliance, one of our commitments in that, which is scheduled to go before the city council on December 9th. But we're able to get a jump on that program, but there's an application on the website if businesses want to apply. They can also just call or email us, and we can help them out if anyone's trying to, running into something that they can't quite figure out themselves. Happy to help. That's the department report for tonight.
Thank you. Any reports by planning commissioners?
Just a comment. A couple of weeks ago, the Historical Society had a workshop for the community about the Veranda Folletti Ranch. And lo and behold, there are questions about what's going on with the hotel. Is it possible to put some type of update in the next water bill about that? Because it seems like there's always questions about that project.
Yeah, I'll bring that up to the city manager's office. I think some of the struggles has been, I guess, accuracy of some of the information we get from the development team and their struggles to follow through on some of the things that they think might happen and some of it's the uncertainty with the financing market. But I'll make that suggestion to the city manager and we'll see what we can do to better disseminate information about the hotel status to the community.
Do you know what's going on with the hotel?
It's, we had this, Commissioner Berman asked the same question last week. The developer has indicated that they have gotten approval for their financing, that they paid the outstanding debts that were remaining, and they intend to re-engage with the city any day. So as far as we know, they're moving forward in the relatively short term.
Cool. Any other reports by commissioners?
Yes. I went to the new dog park. It is a very beloved space. Let me tell you, the dogs love it, the humans love it. The Bermuda grass is great at the dog park. It's shorter. They aren't digging it up. No gopher holes yet. And it's beloved. As long as I don't look at the ballpark, I'm happy. So I put on my blinders and I go to the dog park, and my dog loves it. And it truly, truly, truly is beloved. It's going to be beloved. And the tables are beautiful. Everything about it is beautiful. So nice job.
Reports? No?
None for me either. Moving along, information received after the agenda was posted. No, we all got some things.
There were the
We have
4
them.
comment letters that you received.
We received those. Okay. I also like the dog park. I can throw a Frisbee farther than the dog park is, so it's a little short. With that, it is 7:28. Let's call it adjourned.